Hello and welcome! Happy Winterspell week! We have a new set almost upon us. And I'm sure like many of you, I have been brainstorming, trying to think which cards in set 11 are going to be impactful and maybe changing the meta a bit. When I started collecting Lorcana and playing Lorcana, I was determined to build a deck around Mickey Mouse Brave Little Prince. I just thought his ability was kind of cool. It might not be the most meta ability in the game, but it's definitely strong if you get him going. So I was thinking about other Mickey Mouse shift targets for Brave Little Prince to get his ability active. And I felt that the Detective Sapphire Mickey Mouse may have been one of the better shift target options for Brave Little Prince. So that kind of got me down this whole rabbit hole of building a Sapphire Ruby deck. I quickly learned that in the current meta, Sapphire Ruby is kind of nowhere to be seen. So I was looking at some of the Winterspell new release cards coming soon and was thinking about which ones in Ruby and Sapphire could maybe complement Brave Little Prince a bit better. I started this deck idea with 4 copies of Mickey Mouse Detective and 4 copies of Brave Little Prince. And I was so set on having 4 and 4. I wanted every opportunity to draw and play Brave Little Prince. And it ended up just not shaking out that way. You can already see, spoiler alert in this image, I've whittled that down to just 2 Detective Mickey Mouse and 2 Brave Little Prince. But I still, along the way, started to get a good idea of what could be a fun Sapphire Ruby deck. Now, of course, this is not going to be the most meta deck you'll see. There are parts of this that I've tweaked to be more competitive, but then a lot of this is kind of just cards I want to play, like Brave Little Prince. You can see the goofy, is it Klutzy Skier? The new goofy card coming in Winterspell. Maybe like that goofy card isn't the most competitive option in here. You could probably whittle down and narrow down this deck list to be more tight and more consistent. But I just found through playtesting, I've been wanting to add more and more cards. Like my playtesting strategy with this deck, I'll get into each card and kind of how they play a part. But my playtesting strategy was I wanted to test this deck against some of the strongest out there. One of which I personally feel, especially with Winterspell coming, I feel Amber Amethyst is going to be at the top of the meta. I, could be wrong about that. Of course, Amethyst is always up there, but I feel like that combo in particular of Amber Amethyst is going to be a real force. So I was testing this a lot against Amber Amethyst, and that led me to needing multiple solutions for evasive opposing cards, which Brave Little Prince himself is evasive and can be a solution to like a lot of those meta Amethyst evasive cards. But Brave Little Prince is not super consistent. I mean, just even if you're running 4 copies, you're not gonna, when you do hit the optimal Brave Little Prince line, it is very powerful. But then against Amber Amethyst, there are solutions to that, boosted Brave Little Prince. Like you have World's Greatest Criminal Mind, who is, they can take out Brave Little Prince right away. By the time you get Brave Little Prince out there with your 5-ink shift, they could easily be holding on to a World's Greatest Criminal Mind that they can just sing or play for 3. They will have 3 ink by that time, definitely. So there's that. And then also Horseman Strikes in Amber. Like Amber has multiple solutions that just shut down Brave Little Prince. So that is actually the reason I put Aurora, 4 copies of Aurora in this deck, was from testing against Amber Amethyst. There are just so many weapons that Amber in particular has. And Amethyst. I wanted to use Aurora for multiple reasons, including, stopping Elsa. I don't want Elsa to come in and exert my characters over and over. So, in playtesting, I didn't get Aurora onto the board every single game I was playing of this deck. It, wasn't always the most optimal option, But man, this ability of giving your other characters ward it feels so good. You feel so safe against all the scary options that your opponent might have, especially in an Amber Amethyst opposing deck. So Aurora, I think, is a very strong card. There are not many cards in Lorcana like Aurora. Like, you have the goofy Emerald Champion, who I've been having a lot of fun with in one of my Emerald decks. Maybe I'll get a video out here pretty soon to talk about that. But Aurora and Goofy Emerald Champion are kind of unique cards, so I wanted 4 copies of Aurora. There are a lot of cards in here that are good to have protected. There were a couple times that when I played Maleficent towards the end of a game, and I kind of got into a good position to make a comeback after I had ramped, got my Maleficent out there, cleared their board, and then Maleficent can easily be a victim and a target of World's Greatest Criminal Mind. Like, no problem. That just wipes out your Maleficent that you saved up all that ink for. So Aurora is good at protecting cards like Maleficent. Let's see, protecting cards like Pete, the new Pete in Winterspell. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with. I started out with no Pete at all, and then I started to realize card draw is just too strong, and this deck is great if it has more card draw options, as with any deck really. But I ended up putting in 4 copies of Pete at one point and tested it out with 4 copies of Pete, and it just, more often than not, having Pete out there for 5 cost and then boosting him and then waiting a turn and then questing with him the next turn, it wasn't always the most smooth way of card draw. Like, I found it to be a little clunky, to be honest. So one of my favorite cards in Lorcana right now that I think is underrated is Queen of Hearts, Sensing Weakness. You can see I have 4 copies of her, as well as 4 copies of her shift target. You don't need to shift the 5 cost Queen of Hearts. Like, you'll definitely get to a point where you can easily just play her for 5. There are plenty of games I've had where I had the shift target out there, but I would just rather not shift the 5 cost. I would rather just play the 5 cost, to the side as another unit, so I could have the 2 cost still out there as a way to generate that card draw that same turn. So I think that Queen of Hearts Sensing Weakness is maybe the best card draw tool that Ruby has. Definitely one of the most impactful cards in multiple matches as I was testing this deck. The other, maybe the most impactful card this deck has is Mulan Elite Archer. I was going through a few variations of having Mulan in this deck. I always had 4 copies of Injured Soldier, just so you had as many shift targets as you could, because Elite Archer is, playable when you have a shift target. There's few reasons to play Elite Archer without a shift target. So definitely wanted 4 copies of Injured Soldier. So then I was running like 3 of Elite Archer at one point and 2 of Elite Archer, testing out different quantities. And I just, 3 was good. Definitely wanted 3 over 2 copies. But honestly, I started testing this deck against dogs, another meta staple right now. I wanted to test this scaling late game deck against a really aggressive early game deck that kind of is a weakness in some instances. And Mulan Elite Archer was consistently the best solution to dogs and those aggro style decks with multiple, low cost bodies on the opponent's board. So I wanted 4 copies of Elite Archer. I was even going to just do 4 copies of Elite Archer, 4 copies of Injured Soldier, and call it a day. Because I would almost rather have just a non-shifted Elite Archer out there rather than, waiting to draw one just so I could do 2 damage to 3 targets. But then I figured we have this 3 cost Mulan. I think it's called Standing Her Ground. The 3 cost Mulan maybe isn't the most optimal shift target just when it comes to ink cost and ink efficiency, but might as well get another Mulan out there that's a potential shift target for Elite Archer. And in this deck, there are multiple cards that boost, or in Scrooge McDuck's case, just puts cards underneath other cards. So Mulan standing her ground often has the opportunity to challenge without taking damage. So to kind of summarize my overall opinion on the most impactful cards in this deck, you have Queen of Hearts, Sensing Weakness, and Mulan, Elite Archer. Those are a must. Aurora, she is definitely something I would not want less than 4 copies of. I've won plenty of games without playing Aurora, but in certain matchups, she's just exactly what you need. So I definitely want 4 copies of her in here. I'll quickly go over, of course, you have your ramp options in Sapphire with Tipo, Sail The Azurite Sea, and I did 3 copies of Jiminy Cricket, which is a new card coming from Winterspell. I was kind of toying around with different quantities of the Jiminy Cricket Ghost of Christmas Past card. I settled on 3. It always feels good to play that card. I sometimes ink it, sometimes it's not the most optimal option every game when he's in my hand, but it never felt bad to have Jiminy Cricket going out onto the board. Just like the 3/4 body alone at 3 cost, it tends to be a really solid body for a lot of the opposing characters you'll be facing early in the game. And it is just a great way to expedite your ramp. When you get Jiminy Cricket out there on the board, you'll probably boost him the next turn after you play him. Usually you just don't have enough ink on that same turn, more often than not. And he gives you the opportunity to make use of the Develop Your Brain that you probably discarded when you played it on turn 1. You get to make use of the Sail The Azurite Sea that you likely played on turn 2 and is now just sitting in your discard. So those are probably your 2 most common options for the Jiminy Cricket boost. And even like Tipo, like if you took out like a small body early on with your Tipo and now he's in your discard, it's nice to make use of that with Jiminy Cricket. The new Moana that allows you to ink cards from your discard, that could be a good piece in this deck. I just opted not to include her because of just so much competition of other impactful cards. And Jiminy Cricket just serves the same purpose, being, it's to ink less to play him. And Moana, I did try some games with Moana in here, and it felt great. You ramp up like crazy, but by the time you're at 5 cost, your ramp options are already usually played or they're on the board, like Jiminy Cricket. So it's like by the time you get to 5 ink, you probably want to get your Queen of Hearts out there. You probably want to shift your Mulan out there. So it just never was the best option to play Moana with your 5 ink. That's just what I ran into. And it's a bit redundant, I feel, to have Jiminy Cricket and Moana in the deck because they kind of serve the same purpose. And it's more like a rich get richer scenario when it comes to ramping. So I just went with Jiminy Cricket. He's cheaper. There are other 5 cost cards I want to play. So then we have Rue. I'm going to just go back to the top of the list and start with the lower cost characters. Rue, I want 2 copies of. I think Rue plays a nice role of having another 1 cost option, just to have more 1 costs in your deck and have options for that first turn of the game. And Rue helps ramp multiple cards a bit quicker. Like he gets under Scrooge McDuck to give Scrooge McDuck another boost, which, by the way, this Ruby Scrooge McDuck that's coming in Winterspell, where you keep boosting him each turn and increase his strength and willpower each turn, really strong. And another reason why Aurora is in this deck. Aurora makes you feel so much better about getting this Ruby Scrooge, the ghostly Ebenezer card. You can just get him to crazy numbers. You're basically, even if you challenge with him and you take out, like, let's say you take out an opposing character with like 1 or 2 strength with this Scrooge, the next turn you can boost him and it's almost like you're healing in a way. He still has the damage on him, but you're increasing his willpower by 1 more and his strength by 1 more each turn. And it's kind of like you're healing. You're getting some extra willpower to keep challenging, and he just stays alive throughout a long game. So I really like the Scrooge McDuck card, but Aurora is huge for keeping Scrooge alive because of all this talk about World's Greatest Criminal Mind that I'm doing. Once Scrooge is boosted a second time and he gets to 5 strength, if you're going against an amber deck, then World's Greatest Criminal Mind is just going to be in the back of your mind for the rest of the game until you protect him with Ward from Aurora. So having Aurora, it helps out this new Winterspell Ruby Scrooge as well. But anyway, having putting Rue under Scrooge gives you the opportunity to boost him twice in one turn, which is a really good boost, for lack of a better phrase, to his strength. You can also throw him under Jiminy Cricket if you have a need to ramp a bit more quickly and you have some cards sitting in your discard to use. Rue can be great to throw under Jiminy Cricket. You can also throw Rue under Pete if you want to quickly get another card to look at and potentially decide between as a card to draw. You can do that if you don't have that one extra ink to spend, but you want to draw with Pete. Throw Rue under him, and there you go. When you quest with Pete, you'll be able to draw a card. So Rue, I think, is solid. Not a game changer in this deck. I think Rue is really effective with other decks. Like Little John. I have a Little John deck I'm working on. Let me tell you, I got 4 copies of Rue in that deck. Anyway, 2 copies of Rue here. 2 of Scrooge McDuck only because, well, there's 2 reasons I have 2 copies only of Ghostly Ebenezer, this Ruby Scrooge. One reason he's uninkable. I wanted to minimize the amount of uninkable cards I had in here, so I didn't want 4 copies of Ghostly Ebenezer for that reason. And he only quests for 1. He can be he can turn into a huge force when it comes to challenges. You can use him as just your bruiser, especially if he's protected by Aurora, but he just doesn't move the needle when it comes to gaining lore all that much. So I didn't want to do 3 copies, made it 2. You still see Scrooge relatively often when you're playing this deck, so I think 2 is fine. Also, I only did 2 of the Ruby Scrooge because when the Sapphire Scrooge that we see, the Reformed Ebenezer, the 6 cost, I often did not, I don't think I shifted Reformed Ebenezer on top of Ghostly Ebenezer. I don't think I shifted once. I think I was always playing Reformed Ebenezer beside Ghostly Ebenezer because I had the ink ramped up at that point in the game, and the Ghostly Ebenezer card is one of those cards I wanted to boost anyway. I didn't want to get rid of him, so I often played Reformed Ebenezer alongside Ghostly Ebenezer to give Ghostly Ebenezer Ward and that extra card under him. Giving him Ward is kind of like that Aurora purpose for a single turn. So sometimes Reformed Ebenezer can play a nice protective role in that sense. Moving on to Goofy, Klutzy Skier. You don't need this card in the deck. I think it's a nice tool as another inexpensive removal option. I rarely quested with Goofy. I didn't want to make him vulnerable, even though he quests for 2, and that's kind of nice. I never wanted to make him vulnerable to an opposing character to take out before I could just use his Banish ability. So he was always used for his Banish ability. I rarely quest with him unless the opposing board is empty, and I'm basically just closing out a game at that point. So he is really nice though. He's a good solution to an evasive character that you just are having trouble taking out. He can take out just big beefy bodies. So Goofy Klutzy Skier I had a lot of fun with. He is uninkable, and that's probably his biggest downside. He's also just only a 1/2, so that isn't the best thing ever. So for those reasons, I only have 2 copies of him in here. If you didn't want to play Goofy, you could easily throw those 2 cards towards Headless Horseman, or towards Pete, or towards more Mickey Mouse copies. Any of those are perfectly fine. Pete or Headless Horseman are probably good options if you just don't want to play Goofy. I personally have a lot of fun with that Goofy card, so I'm keeping him in. So then we have Brave Little Prince. Like I mentioned earlier, ended up doing just 2 copies of Brave Little Prince. When you get him going, though, it makes you wish you had 4 in the deck. Like, you could have just a couple different copies in there. And here's the thing. Of course, everyone's thought of this already, I'm sure. But in case you haven't, the Scrooge McDuck Reformed Ebenezer enables you to empower Brave Little Prince without having shifted him. So you can play your Brave Little Prince without having your shift target on the board, and then play Scrooge McDuck Reformed Ebenezer behind him, and then you have your powerful Brave Little Prince, who is now a 5/5 in Quest for 4, without even having shifted him. So Scrooge McDuck Reformed Ebenezer, this whole Winterspell release, is going to allow Brave Little Prince to become more playable in general, which is exciting. And honestly, I might... Here's what happened. I talked about Mulan Elite Archer being that solution that I used most often against dogs. And then I was like, I might need something else to stop aggro dogs style deck. So I for the longest time, I was like fighting the idea of adding the Headless Horseman into this deck. I was like, no, I know he's like one of the best Ruby cards out there. I know he's a great solution to those low cost aggro decks. But I was like, he costs like over $10 right now for a single card. I kind of want to have a budget approach to this deck, at least like a budget besides the Winterspell cards. Like Scrooge McDuck right now is kind of pricey, but my thought is we're going to be opening a bunch of Winterspell packs, so maybe you'll get one of those Scrooge McDuck cards and not have to buy them. But anyway, I was like, for the longest time, not including Headless Horseman, Terror, Sleepy Hollow, because he's uninkable and he's expensive, and I was like, we'll make do, it'll be fine. But then I was testing this against dogs, and I was like, man, even though Mulan Elite Archer is like the best card to play in that matchup, I like the idea of having another solution to those low cost aggro decks. So Headless Horseman, I squeezed into this deck. So that's why when I added Headless Horseman, I removed copies of both Mickey Mouse cards, and that hurt me. It hurt me a lot to do that. So if I wanted this deck to be more my style and a little bit less competitive and strong, I might remove the 2 Headless Horsemen and do 3 Brave Little Prince and 3 Mickey Mouse Detectives, you know? And then moving on, that Mulan Standing Her Ground card, you have these multiple boost cards in the deck. You also have Scrooge McDuck just throwing cards under other cards. So there are plenty of opportunities for Mulan Standing Her Ground to challenge without taking damage, and that's really nice. And also it gives you just another option as a shift target, kind of just your backup plan option. You often want to shift Elite Archer onto Injured Soldier Mulan instead of Standing Her Ground. But if you're just not drawing Injured Soldier for whatever reason and you want to shift this Elite Archer, then at least you have a backup plan. Maybe you'll draw Standing Her Ground and be able to play her out there. So that's the reason. That's the main reason I wanted to play 4 of Elite Archer, because it's so good. It's such a good card. So yeah, that's the main reason I added the 2 copies of Standing Her Ground. Moving on, I talked about Queen of Hearts Sensing Weakness. I just want to re-emphasize that 5-cost Queen of Hearts is so good. I never see it in Ruby deck lists. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong deck lists out there and watching the wrong videos, but the Queen of Hearts Sensing Weakness card is so good. You draw so much. I had to have 4 copies of that. There's my 2 of Headless Horseman that I mentioned. Headless Horseman's also nice because if you have Elite Archer on the board already and you lost your extra strength from that shift turn already, then it's kind of nice for Headless Horseman to give Elite Archer some extra strength to make her more impactful throughout multiple turns. So that's pretty nice. All right, thank you, Headless Horseman. I'll say it. 4 copies of Aurora. You're protecting multiple cards for various reasons. Your Scrooge McDuck, Ghostly Ebenezer that surpasses 5, and you don't want to get hit by World's Greatest Criminal Mind. You protect your Maleficent from World's Greatest Criminal Mind. You protect against a potential mirror match. Like if you are just going against another Ruby Sapphire deck and you want to protect against Hades and Maleficent and Dragonfire, then Aurora does that. She will be the one to take that hit. Get multiple Auroras on the board, forget about it. You're not getting touched. I've had games like that. If I have 2 Auroras on the board, everyone gets ward, and it's awesome. It feels so good, and you just win the game. So Aurora is really nice. Definitely want 4 copies of her. Fight me, I don't care. And then Pete, I did 2 copies. He's really nice for card draw. He's just vulnerable to World's Greatest Criminal Mind. I won't shut up about that card because it has burned me too many times. He can't generate card draw on the turn he's played like Queen of Hearts Sensing Weakness can. Like with Queen of Hearts, you play her and then you have some other dry, like active card beside her that can challenge, and then you're making use of her draw ability right away that same turn you play her. With Pete, he has to dry. You have to wait until the next turn to quest with him to start drawing cards. So I didn't like Pete as much. He was just a little clunky. Everyone's hyped up about this Pete card, and I was willing to give him a shot with 4 copies, but I don't know. He's good. It's nice to have that card draw option, but I went with 2 copies of Pete. And then Mulan Elite Archer, I've talked enough about. Best card in this deck, to be honest. Scrooge McDuck, Reformed Ebenezer. He helps boost your Jiminy, he helps boost your Pete, he helps boost your Ghostly Ebenezer Scrooge, and he helps enable Brave Little Prince if you did not shift Brave Little Prince when you played him. So you can have turns, let's say you get to 9 ink, and of course you're at 9 ink and you're like, yeah, I can play my Maleficent now. Let's say you haven't drawn Maleficent yet, but you have a Brave Little Prince in your hand and you have a Reformed Ebenezer in your hand. Well, there's your 9 ink. You pay 3 for Brave Little Prince, and then you can play Scrooge right behind him. And there you go. You have Brave Little Prince with a card under him without having to shift him for 5. So Scrooge, he is not like always necessary every game, but it is nice to have 2 copies in the deck. So I have 2 in here, and Hades, I have 2. Only reason I don't have more than 2 for Hades is because we have other removal options, and Hades is uninkable, and even though I don't love the fact that he adds those cards to the opponent's inkwell, really, if you're using Hades, at that point in the game, them having more ink is kind of a non-factor, so like who cares? But still, all right, he's uninkable. That's why I only have 2 copies. And he's low strength, only 3 strength, whatever. Maleficent, I have 3 copies because she's inkable, and it's nice to have more consistency drawing Maleficent. So I didn't want 4 copies. I feel like 4 was overboard for that expensive of a card. But 3 felt nice. I definitely like drawing Maleficent in most games that I play. Develop Your Brain, of course, goes without saying, 4 copies. Sail, 4 copies. And Inkrunner, I went with 2. When I was testing against that Amber Amethyst deck that I won't stop talking about, I at one point was like, I want 4 copies of Inkrunner in my deck. I need a solution to evasive cards. But that was just kind of a bit crazy. You don't need 4 copies of Inkrunner. People do 1 copy of Inkrunner. Personally, I don't like that. I want 2. I want more often than not to be drawing Inkrunner into my hand when I play this deck. So you won't get it every game with only 2 copies, but better than 1. So that's why I have 2. I think Inkrunner is really strong, but I didn't do 3 or 4 because I just ended up having other removal options like Elite Archer, like Headless Horseman, like Goofy, Hades and Maleficent, of course. So I didn't need 3 Inkrunners just to have an evasive solution. So 2 felt good. I think 2 is what makes the most sense. So that's it. Yeah. Felt like I would talk about every single card. I don't have, there are some staples I don't have. I don't have Cinderella. All right. She's expensive. Like what, $25 for a Cinderella? No thanks. So I don't have Cinderella in here. You have other ramp options like Jiminy Cricket and Mickey Mouse Detective. This does just fine without Cinderella. And I don't have Maui Half Shark. I don't have a great excuse for that, but he's expensive, okay? So I'm not using Maui Half Shark. Feel free, if you want to play Cinderella, if you want to play Maui Half Shark, take out Goofy. That's fine. Take out both Mickey Mouse cards. That's fine. Whatever. This deck does not need Brave Little Prince. It does not need Mickey Mouse Detective. They're just fun, all right? So if you want to be more optimal, take them out. Play your Maui Half Shark. I don't care. But anyway, this is really fun. I've been having success with this deck, and it's fun. It's like competitive, but a little off meta because we're using Rue and Brave Little Prince and Goofy and Ghostly Ebenezer. So, I mean, it's kind of a nice mix of like, you're going to win some games, but you're not having to like just play the most meta deck that's out there that you stole from somebody else. So I hope you guys enjoy. Let me know what you think of this list and what you would change. Anything that I'm missing, maybe some spicy, fun cards that I left out that could make it a good fit. Let me know in the comments. Hope you enjoyed. I will have more of these in the future with some other ideas I'm cooking up. I mentioned Little John. Stay tuned for that. But yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. See you in the next one.